Welcome to episode 4 of the Real Estate Investing Roadmap podcast. I'm your host, Matt Jones. I'm an avid real estate investor and real estate agent here in beautiful Pensacola, Florida. Last time we were together, I covered house hacking strategies in detail. Today, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about how to run your numbers when you're considering a property for a house hack, whether or not it will make a good deal. To be clear, the numbers we will talk about today are for house hacking investments where you're going to live in part of the property and rent it out either while you live there or after you've gone. If you're looking to do a live-in flip or something along those lines, you'll want to use numbers for flipping. This is for rental property investing, so house hacking and using it as a long-term rental at some point. Every investor and every deal are different. So I encourage you to run your own numbers. This is just an example that I want to run you through, but I think that you'll find it to be very helpful. My main metric for considering whether or not a property is going to make a good house hack is what is the return on investment when I no longer live there. Now, I don't want to undervalue the savings that I'm going to get from house hacking while I live there. It's just that at some point I'm going to move out. And the numbers when I no longer live there are really the important ones. Those are the numbers that are going to tell you whether or not it's going to cash flow, whether or not it's going to be a good investment that you want to continue to hold. While you live there, you're just offsetting your personal living expenses. So everything is going to be better than not house hacking when you're talking about your own personal living expenses. But when you move out, you need it to cash flow and be self-sustaining. So if the property won't cash flow when I move out, it doesn't really matter how well it does when I live there. To me, it's not going to be worth it for a house hack investment. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive in. I'm going to take a minute and encourage those of you who might be listening instead of watching to check this episode out on YouTube. There's going to be things you can take pictures of, and obviously I'm able to illustrate it on video much better than if you happen to be listening to the audio-only version of this. Okay, for this example, we're going to use a $200,000 property. Okay, the information you're going to need before you can accurately or even be in the ballpark of analyzing any property is going to be your mortgage, and by that I mean your principal and interest, okay, on the outstanding mortgage balance. You're going to need your property taxes, you're going to need your homeowner's insurance, and you're going to need to know what the market rental rate is going to be. You're going to need those pieces of information before you can move forward. In reality, we can only estimate some of these numbers, and that's completely fine. Now, as you move through your due diligence and you can get more accurate, more solid numbers, you'll want to update your analysis as you go. Don't get caught in analysis paralysis here. You can't know everything at the front end. The goal here is to analyze the property quickly and either move it onto your list of possibles or strike it all together, right? So you're just going to take the best information you can get at this stage in the game, and you're going to run a quick analysis. Let's start with your mortgage principal and interest, or your P&I. I used mortgagecalculator.org, super simple. I put in your, let's start with the loan real quick. So I'm assuming an FHA loan with 3.5% down. Some of you may have a VA loan available with 0% down. You may be using a 5% down conventional or any number of other loan products. So you'll need to plug in your actuals. But for our example, we're going to say FHA 3.5% because they're very popular and it's very common. Okay. We're also going to assume that you got a 5.5% interest rate. Okay. And we're going to put down 0 for taxes and 0 for insurance on the calculator because we're going to estimate those separately. So $200,000 with 3.5% down leaves you a starting mortgage of $193,000 at 5.5%. That's $1,176. Okay, let's talk taxes. So your property taxes are going to vary wildly by city and state, but those are not the only factors. All right, other things that you may want to consider are how long the previous owner has owned that property. Where I live and where I sell real estate, there's a cap on how much they can raise your taxes if you own or occupy a property, or even if you don't. there's a cap on how much they can raise them in any given year. So somebody who's lived there 30 years has probably enjoyed a lot of years where the cap kept their taxes from going up as much as they should have. The accumulation of that can be very significant. Okay, so you want to estimate taxes based on what they're going to be when you own the property. What somebody else with the previous owner paid for taxes in the past is less important by a long shot than what you're going to pay for taxes. All right, so I just want to get that out of the way and make sure that you're thinking about that. If you look at properties that have sold recently and had enough time to be reassessed, you can probably get an idea of what the tax rate is and how much your taxes are going to change. So using that, you may be able to arrive at some kind of formula like what we're going to use here. So we're going to say that the taxes I see on average are 0.85% of the property's market value. Okay, in our case, that's 0.85% of $200,000, which breaks down to $141 a month. This is just a rough way to do it, a quick way to do it, because we're, again, going to try to analyze properties quickly so we can analyze a lot of properties and narrow our list down, and then we're going to make these numbers more concrete as we're able to verify things down the road. Another thing you may be able to do, you can ask your real estate agent. Sometimes your lender can help you project taxes, or at least I can say in my area in the state of Florida, your title company is generally a good resource for what your taxes are going to be after closing. So again, you can plug in a number here, try to get your number more accurate as you go through the process, but get some kind of number here. So we've got our mortgage, principal, and interest. We've got our taxes so far. Next, you're going to want to estimate your hazard insurance or your property homeowner's insurance. Again, this is going to vary by the area that you're buying in, but here in Florida, this is one of the harder things for us to estimate because we have hurricanes here. You get large discounts for what kind of wind mitigation features your property has. So this is one where it's more important to update it than probably even the others because it can vary so wildly. But for our example here, I'm going to use 1% of the property's value. So let's say that insurance on our property is going to run $2,000 a year or $167 a month. I recommend talking to your insurance agent, talking to your real estate agent, and try to get a feel for what that number might be in your area. Maybe it's 1% like what we're using here. Maybe it's 2%. Maybe you're in a state that has a lot fewer hazards like hurricanes, and you're only paying 0.5% or 0.25% of the property's value in insurance. But talk to the professionals you're dealing with and get an idea what that number looks like so that you can plug it into our equation here and quickly analyze properties. Okay, the last number that I'm going to look for here is miscellaneous expenses. That was not in our breakdown initially of what you need because you don't always have any and you're not always able to get this information on the front end. So if you don't have any miscellaneous expense information, move on and skip it, but be sure to ask about miscellaneous expenses or expenses in general when you go tour the property if you're thinking about making an offer on the property. So what are we talking about with miscellaneous expenses? Well, any owner paid utilities. Now that's a lot more common on multifamily where you might not have separately metered properties, right? You have one water meter and 3 units, it's harder to split that bill. Some people do. You can do utility bill back. RUBS it stands for Ratio Utility Bill Back System. RUBS, R-U-B-S. So there are ways to do that, but it's less common. So are there any underpaid utilities? Lawn care, right? Even on a single family, you would want to know, are you going to be able to have the tenants pay for or take care of the lawn? Are you going to do that? Pest control, HOA dues, anything that wouldn't fall in here, but it's a fixed expense that you can expect to be recurring. Okay, now I need an estimate for the market rental rate for my potential property. Your real estate agent should be a good resource for this. Also, if you've talked to or engaged a property manager already, then you can certainly get their opinion on the market rental rate. But just to get started, I recommend doing kind of a quick and dirty analysis. See what else is for rent on the various rental websites. Check out rentometer.com. That's something I use from time to time just to get a ballpark. So just get a number to get started with so you can run your numbers. For our property, let's say that it meets the famous 1% rule, $200,000 house. 1% of that is $2,000. Okay, so you subtract your P&I, your property taxes, your insurance, your miscellaneous expenses from the market rent, and you're left with $516. That sounds pretty great, right? And that's where a lot of people that are trying to be a real estate expert on TikTok or Instagram or wherever you're finding me, for that matter, that's a lot of times where they stop. They say, buy 10 properties, you've got $5,000 a month in free cash flow. This is so easy. This is a great way to go broke. Stopping here is a great way to buy properties that don't cash flow. And I'm going to show you why. Okay, so what expenses got left out? Why is that 516 not a real number? Well, first of all, whether you're going to manage the property yourself or you're going to hire a property manager, you need to account for property management. Why? Well, for everybody that manages themselves, that's great. I don't blame you. I think it's a great thing to do a little management yourself at the minimum early on and kind of learn the business. But things change. Jobs get transferred. Family members get sick. You could become disabled, okay? You could decide that you want to travel extensively. If anything changes in your life and you don't have the margin to hire a property manager, you're now losing this money and you hadn't budgeted for it. So budget for it up front and you're ready down the road if you want to, or worse, if you have to hire a property manager at some point. Property managers in my area generally run 8 to 10% for a good competent manager for a long-term rental. How about vacancy? Do you think that someone is going to live in your unit and pay you every single day that you ever own it? That'd be amazing, but it's not going to happen. People move. Great tenants that love the property, they get transferred. Their kids need to go to a different school. They get married or divorced. Things in their life change and they move. Okay? I account 5% for vacancy. And that way, when the time comes, you're not bleeding whole month's worth of expenses. You've got some money set aside for vacancy. Okay? You can also, some people will call it vacancy and credit loss, because in addition to you having some time when people won't be living there, you could have times when tenants are late or they move out and they owed you a month's rent or something along those lines. So we're essentially just putting aside for that every month, knowing that it's going to come one day. And it does impact your cash flow. 516 is not your cash flow. You've got to take out management. You've got to take out vacancy. What about repairs? What about when the air conditioner breaks? Worse, what about when it needs to be replaced? You going to pay for those things out of your pocket, or are you going to set aside money every month knowing that they're coming? That's what a real thorough investor is going to do. That's what a business person is going to do. They're going to account for the things they expect, and we absolutely expect repairs. You'll also see I put CapEx here. Stands for capital expenditures, which would be the larger things like replacing your roof, maybe a renovation falls in there, replacing an air conditioner, appliances. You want to put aside some money every month. Now, I use 10% for the CapEx number here because I assume that this home is in pretty good condition. We're buying it with an FHA loan, and they're going to have some requirements. But if the property has an old roof, if it has a bunch of old appliances, if it's just in kind of general disrepair, you may need to account for much more than 10% in repairs and in capital expenditures. But for our case, I'm going to use 10%. That's what I use personally, because generally I'm renovating my properties before I'm renting them out the first time, which lowers my overall out-of-pocket in repairs and CapEx. So now we have lost $460 from our 516 that we supposedly cash flowed, or what some people would call cash flow. What's left $56. Your net cash flow is $56. Okay? So if you didn't take the steps all the way down, you didn't account for management, vacancy, and repairs, and this property had cash flowed instead of $516, let's say taxes were $200 a month. Well, now you would be losing $3 a month instead of what you thought making for $450. Okay, so you have to account for all of your expenses. We know they're going to come. Let's just be realistic and let's plan on the outset. Now, is $56 in monthly cash flow good or bad? I don't know. That's up to you. But I'm not personally terribly discouraged by $56 in cash flow. Why? Because what did I tell you was my primary metric? I want to know what my return on the investment is going to be. This doesn't tell me. This tells me only what I'm going to make in 1 month. Okay? What do I need to know to be able to calculate my return on investment? Let's dig into it. Okay, so while I'm definitely not over the moon about $56 per month in cash flow, I'm not totally dejected by it either. Why? Well, in the episode where we talked about why invest in real estate, we discussed that real estate makes you wealthy over time. So it's a game of time, and it's going to make you wealthy in more ways than one as well, right? We talked about tax advantages, we talked about mortgage paydown, we talked about appreciation. So let's take that $56 a month, combine it with the other benefits of investing in this example property here, and run our numbers based on the return on our total investment, which we'll get into as well. So $56 a month comes out to $672 per year in cash flow. Now let's figure out what you've got in the property so that we can divide the cash flow by the total investment, and that's going to give us your cash on cash return, right? So we talked about using an FHA loan, putting 3.5% down. 3.5% of $200,000 is $7,000. Let's assume that you had to pay 2.5% in closing cost, so that's another $5,000. So your total investment is going to be $12,000. So you take 672, you divide it by 12,000, and you get 5.6%. Your cash on cash return is 5.6%. Again, I'm not super excited about that. I'd like to see it be 10, but it's only part of the equation. And in a hot market, 5.6% cash on cash return may not be so bad. A quick side note here. Now that the market has cooled a little bit in some areas, right? Still super hot some places, other places you're starting to have the pendulum swing back toward being in favor of the buyers. So now that the market's cooled off, if you're in one of those places where that's true, getting the seller to pay 2.5% for your closing cost may be well within grasp. Okay, that would change your numbers where your total investment would only be $7,000, right? Just the 3.5% down because they've paid your closing cost, which kicks your cash on cash return up to 9.6%. So we're almost to that 10% that was our goal anyway. What other returns do you get? In addition to cash flow, every month you're paying down your mortgage. In the first year that you have, your first full year of having a mortgage on this property, you're going to pay down that $193,000 mortgage by $2,734. Every year until the year you pay it off at year 30, you're going to see that number increase. So this is actually worst case scenario on mortgage paydown. It's going to go up every year from there, increasing your returns in effect. What other returns will you get? Well, most years your property is going to go up in value. A pretty conservative estimate that I use personally on mine is 2.5%. I expect that my property is going to go up by 2.5% of its value on average, okay, in any given year. So that's $5,000. So now we've taken our $672 and we've added $5,734 more dollars in returns. What does that look like? What does that look like on a total return? Well, I'll tell you what that looks like. that looks like $8,406. Or if you're doing the math, that's over 70% return on your initial investment of $12,000. And that's assuming you paid the down payment and your closing cost. That's powerful stuff. Say you want to be a little bit more conservative when you run your return numbers, because it is possible that your property never goes up in value, or it's possible that it went down, in value, at least in any given year. It's pretty unlikely over the long term, but in 1 or 2 years or 5 years, it's possible. So say we take out the appreciation. You still have $3,400 in returns from your cash flow, your mortgage pay down. Those are real things impacting your bank account and your balance statement every year, right? That's still over 28% return on your $12,000 investment. Okay, so I told you that real estate makes you wealthy over time. So let's talk about a longer time horizon. What do these numbers look like over a 20-year period? Let's just use 20 years, right? If you take the more conservative approach and you only figure cash flow and mortgage pay down, you've turned your $12,000 in 20 years to $67,000. What about if you include the appreciation, right? Because in most cases, your property does go up in value. Your total return is now $168,000. Real estate combined with time can be incredibly powerful for you financially. So this is just one property. Imagine if you were able to buy a property every year or every other year, or say you've got a lot of other things going on, but every 5 years you could buy a property. What if you could turn $12,000 into $168,000, and you could do that by purchasing a property every 5 years and have 4 properties. When you hit retirement, you've got 4 properties where you turn $12,000 into $168,000. You combine that with other retirement savings, and you've greatly improved your position. So the numbers we covered here, they're not really limited to house hacking. If you want to analyze any rental property, you can use this framework, right? It's very likely that your down payment's going to be higher. Your cash on cash return may be lower, depending on what kind of investing you're doing. But this framework is just simply the framework for how to run your numbers on a long-term buy and hold rental property. A good additional exercise is to figure out how much money you're going to be saving while you live there. If you're going to be renting out part of the property, whether it's rooms in your unit or your house, or whether you're going to be buying a multifamily and renting out other units, figure out how much it's going to impact your financial position while you live there and what that could do for you. It's great. It's exciting to know, man, I'm able to put away an extra $2,000 a month. I'm going to be able to buy my next rental property so much faster, right? It's not the point. The point is to run the long-term analysis, but it's still a good additional exercise, and it's great to know what your sacrifice of house hacking is doing for you every month financially. To really get the process of running your numbers down, I would encourage you to watch this video again or send an email to the REIRoadmap@gmail.com, and I'll send you a written breakdown of how to complete this analysis. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the REI Roadmap podcast. I hope to see you again next week.